All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sahadev Zala. Welcome to the IBM Cloud SIG meeting for Wednesday, May 23rd. Before we start, I was just wondering, the folks, we have one or two new folks join. If they're okay, just give a little introduction to everyone. That'll be helpful. So basically, the first time meeting joiner, I guess. Benjamin, I know you just said, but Sil, and I see you, Ronnie, ERTV. The introduction is not sort of required, so we can skip that part. Please do. I did put a link in the chat for the meeting notes and agenda. So please do put your name in the agenda, in the attendees list, if you haven't already. For today's meeting, the agenda is short. We're gonna have Richard from IBM Cloud Kubernetes Service providing an overview of updating Kubernetes in IKS. So, all right, and while I'm talking, I see in the chat that Rennie Ortiz is on mute. Hey, that's fine. So I guess without delay, I will hand it over to Richard to provide the overview, and then we can have a bit some more discussion, any ideas, sort of open discussion. So Richard, to you.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to share my screen here. Give me one moment. Pull that up. Is that coming through on your end? So we'll get started.
Yep.
All right. So I want to talk about Kubernetes updates, but before I do that, I want to level set on Kubernetes releases. And we'll start with the community side of things, what the community landscape looks like when it comes to Kubernetes releases. And then it kind of plays into how we manage releases in the IBM Cloud Kubernetes service. So if you have a decoder ring, you take a look at this slide and kind of pull out the pieces here, what this means. I took a view of Kubernetes community releases over the course of about a month or a year and a half, and you see Kube 1.5 to Kube 1.10, which is current release that's available. And over that course of the year and a half, you can see the certification program come into play for Kube 1.7 and continuing on to 1.10. You can also see these warning icons that I have labeled next to 1.5, 6, and 7, basically indicating the community has stopped providing patch level updates for that release. So at any given slice of time, you can expect, based upon past, recent history and what looks like to be the path forward in the community, at least in the short term, is 3 supported releases of Kube at any given time, maybe 4 for a certain short period of time. So if we look at the IBM Cloud Kubernetes service and what that means, again, taking that same landscape over the course of about a year and a half, we went out with Kube 1.5, not certified. The program hadn't started yet, and there's no back level certification for older releases. But then starting in 1.7, 8, 9, and 10, we've certified our releases. We did not provide a release at 1.6. And then you can see our timeline over when those releases were provided in the IBM Cloud Kubernetes service. And it varies as far as how long after the community went out that we made our release available. So we have 1.10 available. Our default, if you just go off and try to create a cluster without making any changes, is 1.9. Okay. I have an icon here, again, a warning icon next to some of the releases. In particular, 1.5 is unsupported right now in our service. And the only supported path, really, if you have 1.5 clusters, is to upgrade them. And we do allow that. You can go to 1.7 But then 1.7 also has the icon here indicating that it is deprecated, and we just did that yesterday. So you have 30 days before that release becomes unsupported. So you have a similar timeline of 3 releases of Kubernetes, maybe 4 at a given time in our service as well. And you find that relatively consistent in other managed services with respect to Kubernetes and so on. So that for some is quite aggressive, and to keep pace can be challenging. So with that, any questions before I'm going to jump over to an actual update demo? While I get that set up, I'll stop for any questions here.
Richard, I do have a quick question. Makes any sense. I was just wondering about any point releases to these major releases. So 1.8.x release or 1.9.x. Is that just covered when we said the major release? The last 3 releases sort of support cycle.
Yeah, so there's a whole pile of point releases on the patch level. That's your question, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm kind of combining those all together. So for example, the latest at 1.7 was 1.7.16. I think at 1.8 you're at 1.8.13 and 1.9.8 and 1.10.3. So you can see there are quite a few patch level releases that are made available over that course of time when that major minor is supported.
Do we support choosing any point release, or is it always the very latest point release?
So in our service, it's the very latest.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So I'm going to do another share here and switch over to my browser, and hopefully all is good and you can see this fine as well. So I have a couple clusters, and I want to start back at 1.5, and I'll move forward here and kind of take you through what the update process looks like. So I have a cluster at 1.5. You can see this icon here indicating that it is unsupported, and I can take a look to get more information on that. And I can upgrade that cluster to 1.7 or 1.8. 1.7 clusters, you see the icon here that it's deprecated. The support will end in a month. Still have full features and functions on this 1.7 cluster, and I can also update that. Okay. I'll jump over to another region here, US South. I have a couple clusters I created this morning, and one was at release 1.8 and one is at release 1.9. And this view here is of the master of the cluster. And I'll take a look at the workers in the cluster as well in a moment. But what you'll see here is that in the case of 1.8, I created, it's a cluster at 1.8.11 is my patch level. And I have this icon saying that an update is available. Essentially what we're doing in our service is when we switch the default version, and that would be the default version that you get when you create a cluster. When we switch that and move that forward, any clusters that are behind the default, we provided an indication icon saying that an update is available. So you come in and view your cluster, you can see that you're behind the default. You should probably consider moving forward. Our idea here is to try to get you to move forward so you stay current and you're not in that situation you saw in the last region where I have unsupported cluster there. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and click update on this cluster here. And let that spin in the background, and I'm going to update that to 1.9. And I'll link off to the docs here in a moment. But basically, just kind of give you an idea of what you might expect on this update and what that looks like. And our recommendation is not to jump more than 2 releases. So we could go from 1.8 to 1.10 relatively easily. If we start considering a larger jump, then there may be things that are incompatible, and that not only from our service standpoint, but from Kubernetes standpoint as well. You can imagine all the combinations that likely are not tested if you start jumping too far. So I'm going to switch and jump this one to 1.9, so that gets kicked off. And while that gets going, you can see the version is pending to go to 1.9. So I'm going to jump over to this other cluster, which I updated the master earlier to 1.10. And if I take a look at the worker nodes for this cluster, they're still at 1.7, and I can expand those views, and I can see that a newer version of Kubernetes exists. And basically, within our service, anytime that you have a master that is newer than the workers, and that there's whether it be a patch level or a major minor update to a worker, we will provide an indication as such that there is an update available. And this will, when I click the update button, it will take me to the latest patch release. You don't have a choice on what patch level is available on that update. So we're always trying to move you forward as part of our managed service on the majors or on the workers and the master side.
So Richard, quick
yes.
question for you. So
Sure.
it sounds like, I want to make sure I have this right for the notes. So when you upgrade a cluster, does just the master, and then you have to go in and explicitly upgrade the workers separately. Is that true?
That is correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Got it.
Sure. So
Just curiously, what's the reasoning behind that? I'm sure there's a good reason for it, but I just wanted to ask.
the reasoning behind not doing the whole thing at once, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So that's certainly something I've been, and others have been considering is, do we just have a one button that does it all, and it kind of it kind of rolls that out across the spectrum, and that certainly could be doable. So on the worker side, it's more, so what we've done is we've taken the master update, which is the control plane, right? And it does the update of Kubernetes on your master side. And when it comes to the workers, when we update a worker, we reload the worker. So effectively, you're booting pods off the worker and you're reloading it up to the newest release. So it's not an in-place upgrade. So in that sense, it's we've set it as 2 steps so you're aware of the ramifications of doing that update, right?
Yeah, like a good example is that we do have some customers that have extremely long running jobs that run on their worker nodes. And so they wanted to be
Good example.
So like some of the teams in Watson have like batch processing on large data sets that could run for hours.
Nice.
And so, they basically are doing their own, they're coordinating the nodes, but like the standard Kubernetes train process doesn't really fly for them, right? Essentially, they leave them coordinated and then let them sort of quiesce on their own by having those jobs finish on the nodes. So this basically allows them to get much more fine-grained control of performing basically maintenance operations on the worker nodes is really what it comes down to.
Nice. Okay, good answer. Thank you.
Something else that's probably worth noting here is that we do have a configuration map in the cluster that allows you to designate how much capacity could be taken offline, and that can be configured for a set of workers based on labels. But it allows you to select all the workers and just let the process do the update. And based on the configurations in the map, we will determine how many worker nodes can be taken offline to be updated, basically reducing the capacity of your cluster without disrupting your applications. So you can configure that. By default, we have that set at 20%.
Yes, exactly. And as you can see here, while I selected both worker nodes to be updated, you can see both are pending. Only one is actually being updated at this particular time. So in a small case here would just be one worker at a time, and it will roll through and update your cluster. But yeah, this two-step process gives you much more fine-grained control, and not only that, is you can select specific workers and when you want them to update. If you have even, you're maybe more paranoid about wanting to control all aspects every step of the way. So it's a balance. Now at this time, our service doesn't do any automatic patch level updates or upgrades of your worker nodes. But on the master side, so if we look on the masters, I'm going to go back to the master view. And the 1.8 cluster master has already been updated to 1.9.7. But let's say next week or two, we release the latest 1.9 patch level, which I believe right now is 1.9.8. That type of patch level update, when we provide and roll that out, will actually automatically get applied to your cluster master. So we manage patch level updates, security, bug fixes, and so on for you on your masters. And then leave the upgrades from major, minor, and worker updates and patch updates to you as a user.
So question for you, sorry to interrupt. Is there a concept of rollback? Like if you, go to a new version and you find out one of your workloads is behaving sort of aberrantly and you'd like to go ahead and roll that back? Is there a concept of that in this?
The concept in the community, yes, there is that concept, and some providers give you that ability to roll back. We do not have the ability to roll back a version, not the master or the workers. So we haven't, over the course of the service, it actually hasn't come up from that I'm aware of, a need actually to do the rollback of the master. Or the
so, because the other thing I'm thinking of is there a concept of canary style deploy where you can maybe have some hooks to test out that the upgrade worked and to know, before I go ahead and upgrade them to a different patch level?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our customers are basically have development environments where they're running, their dev workloads for their services and applications, and they'll do some upgrade testing there before rolling out to their production clusters. So it's a little bit traditional, pipeline deployment for version upgrades and things like that.
Okay, so a separate sort of facsimile of the production one, go ahead and test out over there to the new version. If it's okay, then go ahead and click the button over here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's what our customers are doing.
And even with as you do that rollout into production, if you're more paranoid, you can, like with the worker nodes, you can do a handful of the worker nodes, 2 or 3 of them, depending on how large your cluster is, upgrade those, put some of the workloads onto it and watch it and make sure everything's functioning properly. If it's not, there's really not a rollback at that point. You can delete them out of the cluster and keep the others at the same level until you figure out what the problem was. But we found that rolling forward and testing in a test cluster is sufficient for a large population of customers. It also keeps the scenarios much less complicated, so it can keep our update process as simple as possible.
So Dan, in that scenario where you've upgraded some of the worker nodes and for whatever reason you decide it wasn't working out for you, so you delete those worker nodes, if you want to recreate some worker nodes, or I'm sorry, just create new worker nodes, are you given a choice of what Kubernetes version those worker nodes are running at, or does it always default to the same version as the master?
It's going to default to the same level as the master.
Okay,
always.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So there is no going back once you try to upgrade it if you don't like it. So it behooves us to go ahead and do the testing outside.
Okay.
Right. So you can imagine first, for the speed at which the community moves, like hanging out too long backwards is a problem, right? You're going to run out of support pretty quick. So you want to move forward. So I think the strategy is doing that testing if you have a separate test cluster, or trying it out on an application, a few workers or whatever it may be, and moving forward as quick as you can in understanding the ramifications of that, being able to quickly turn around fixes if you have to, and as opposed to trying to go backwards, right? I think you find yourself in a better position to try to move forward, fix things, keep going, and iterate on.
So going forward sounds definitely the way to go. Have you guys experienced, I've only been with Kubernetes since the 1.7, and maybe we're up to 1.9 now. Has there ever been a situation where you just kind of moved forward, and it was so bad that the community recommended that you just move backward? Has there ever been anything that bad?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
No, and if you look, right, when you go provision a new cluster, we sort of have kind of annotations that we provide to the version. So there's latest, which right now is 110.1, and then we have what we kind of call stable, which is 197. So we're sort of basically like weaning until a given minor release of Kube gets to a certain level of maturity before we mark it as being stable. You know, we don't release, like when we released 110.1, there wasn't any indication that there's anything wrong with it, but like it had limited time, you know, in production at that point in time. And so, you know, it's just nice. We're sort of basically using experience to make decisions about when to sort of fully mark it as stable.
I think the closest thing I've heard of in the community, and I apologize, I can't remember the exact release number, but I could have sworn there was at least one Kubernetes release where it came out and they pretty quickly said, wait, there's an issue. And then rather than telling people to roll back, what they ended up doing is doing a point release really quickly. I can't remember which one it was. So they continue to move forward, because if you think about it, in order for there to be something that bad, I mean, almost all their test cases would have to fail, and that's pretty darn unlikely. And as I think Jake was saying, you know, every platform provider is going to do their own testing anyway before they offer it to their customers. So the chances of that happening is probably pretty slim.
Okay, great, that makes sense. Thanks, guys.
Right, and generally we see these kinds of problems, the breakage problems, on the minor release boundaries, going from a 1.8 to a 1.9 or 1.9 to a 1.10. The fixed packs, I have not seen issues ever moving up fixed packs, but it's those minor releases, and that's the main reason why we do what we do, marking things stable and latest, as Jake said. Even moving up to 110, we didn't roll out the 110.0 because of that very nature. Richard knows all of that story quite well. There were regressions through our testing. We found regression because we use Kubernetes ourselves internally, not only on our own service but with a lot of our customers internally. So we find a lot of those problems pretty early. And 110 was not stable enough for us, so we skipped it and went straight to 110.1 as our first release that we certified on for 110.
Yeah, we haven't done a .0 yet. I think
No, we haven't. That's true.
.1, I think it'd be actually the closest that we've gotten. I think we did
Right.
4 when
I don't think we'll ever plan to do a .0, maybe.
No, I don't think so. I don't know of anybody that would actually ask for it, right?
So, and then on the lines of, so if you step back, you take a look at what's in the Kube community. If you take a look at, let's just say, the change log for 110, and you were trying to do this all on your own, and I'm scrolling here, and there is a lot going on, right? And if you want to wade through all that, is quite a challenge. But what we try to do is some of that applies, some of it not, and in our service, we're trying to skinny that down so that if I'm going to 110, like, what should I do before I update my masters? Well, we have 4 actions you should take. So we're trying to take all of that out there, manage it down to something that you as a user running your applications may have to worry about, and post that as an action for you to take. You certainly could go read it all yourself, but hopefully as we learn, we build that up, and that is effectively the migration actions. And if you see the history of our doc here, from updating from 1.5, now getting to 1.10, Kubernetes has gotten way better. And our first jump, 1.5 to 1.7, was much more of a challenge than these other ones have been, because of the automation, the testing that's in place in the community from vendors and others. They've gotten really good about this, and having a smaller release cycle means less problem, smaller jumps and smaller scopes of change sets, making updates easier and more efficient, and in the end, relatively painless for most folks. So, and any other questions? Otherwise, that kind of just takes you through the basics. You know, we're still looking at refining this process as we learn more, since we've released the service, and how to make the experience better. So you're welcome to reach out to us and let us know. That's it for today for me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, guys.
Yeah.
Sure. Richard, thank you so much. That was very educational. A lot of good stuff to learn there. Next thing in the agenda is announcement to the name change on IBM Cloud Container Service. So we have Dan Berg here. We have Jack. If one of you want to announce that name change. please?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. So I guess, when we originally released our, Kubernetes as a service support, it was called the IBM Cloud Container Service. And you'll sort of notice that like all of the providers have sort of been through this transition where once the Kubernetes conformance test came out, there was a lot, there was all the testing and compliance work and stuff that came with that. But then also part of that was sort of just the trademark and copyright work that came with it in order to use Kubernetes as part of product names. And so, we finally kind of did the hard work internally of doing the legal name change to be called the IBM Cloud Kubernetes Service instead of the IBM Cloud Container Service. So, just, no change in the actual service itself. I think it's just hoping to kind of help our customers understand a little bit better what it means when they just sort of read the name. Plus, also, I really wanted to be able to call it IKS. So I was, I think the whole development team was super excited once we got to have the K instead of ICCS. So.
And all our competitors have the K in their name. I mean,
That's
come
right.
on.
So it's like K means Kubernetes, right? If you have 30-letter acronym and there's a K, everybody on the planet just assumes you must be talking about Kubernetes.
Nice.
Okay.
It's a happy day.
Yeah, so it's nice.
Cool. Thanks, Jake.
Sure.
So I don't see anything else in the agenda besides open discussion. Again, one of the purpose for this SIG is having IBM Cloud users and developers in IBM, outside IBM, to provide a sort of an open platform, for discussions, right? And anywhere, on the IKS side, IBM Cloud Private, if the developers, users run into any issues which needs to be fixed in the upstream, for example, and we open an issues there, we actually can discuss here. We can track those issues with the SIG, the IBM Cloud SIG label there. And even help the new contributors if anybody wants to contribute to upstream Kubernetes. We have expertise here in this group who can help them to contribute. So going forward, if any such needs come up, any such interest is out there, please let everyone know, right? And we can discuss that as well. But other than that, it's open discussion right now. If anyone has any other questions, anything to discuss. Or otherwise, we can call this a meeting, good 30 minutes meeting. Thanks again, Richard, for very educational session. Dan, Jack, for your inputs. And Khalid, I'm glad that you could join. Khalid is one of the SIG leads, and I think he was traveling, but glad you could make it. Well, if no other topic, thanks again. I guess so. These are the bi-weekly calls. So see everyone in 2 weeks then.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.